Welcome, folks. We'll get going here in just a minute. We've got a pretty healthy crowd here today, not surprisingly. So welcome. We have a lot of good news to go over. And I'm a little worried that we're going to hit our max here. It was a little oversubscribed today, but let's fingers crossed on that. And we have a special guest coming in about 20 minutes to join us in our celebration. Excuse me, let me just put this up. I'm going to speak for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to have a special guest, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion to go up to the top of the hour. And so, thank you all for being here. Congratulations, everybody. I mean, it was another remarkable election. I'm very proud of all of you. Folks are welcome to use the Q&A. I realize that I don't have the traditional chat open just to let other folks know where you're from. We do have people here from all over the country today. Wonderful group. And let me get going because we're all busy and it's a crazy time and I'm frankly exhausted and tired. And so let me get going. Listen, welcome everybody. This is Simon Rosenberg from Hopium Chronicles, my new and exciting and fun home. I'm really here today to celebrate another remarkable election night for Democrats. We've had a bunch now in a row, and it's very heartening for our democracy and for the future of our country. I first of all want to just begin by thanking all of you. Many of you here, perhaps all of you, worked hard on this election. Part of the superpower that the Democratic Party has now is all of you. We've got millions of proud patriots who love their country, who are not going to let their democracy slip away on their watch. And all of you are going to work, writing your postcards, making your calls, doing your texts, canvassing, donating, being an information warrior, spreading hopium, all the things that we do here. And it's having an incredible impact. I mean, I really do believe our win last night was a bottom-up, grassroots-driven win, as 2022 was. It's a remarkable response of patriots all across this country who are fighting hard to make sure we have a better future for our kids and our grandkids. And so, first thing, most important, thank you all for everything you did. It really matters. And as I mentioned in my note today, in Virginia, where we, Hopium community, for the first time, really dove in and raised money and worked on races in a very intense way, we ended up flipping 2 seats in the Virginia House. And right now we're at 51 in the Virginia House. So those 2 seats that we flipped, 2 of the races we focused on, were the difference between us having the majority and the minority. So if you want to know the kind of impact that your work has, I mean, we went from having it being a good night in Virginia to a great night in Virginia in part because of the work of people in this community that we took on together. Let me just start and level set, as I often do in these presentations, on what happened in 2022 and then fast forward it to today. In 2022, we had 2 elections. We had a bluer election inside the battleground, a redder election outside the battleground. Inside the battleground, despite high inflation and low Biden approval, we actually gained ground in Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Minnesota, Michigan, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania from 2020. We improved our standing and overperformed 2020 in what was supposed to be a bad year. We got to 59% in Colorado, 57% in Pennsylvania, 55% in Michigan, 54% in New Hampshire. And this was supposed to be a bad year. Those would be great results in a good year. And those were results we got in a so-called bad year, in a red wave year. And it's important to recognize and to acknowledge, given what's happened in the years since, that we were able to get up into the upper 50s in these battleground states and during the 2022 election and improve our standing. And in 2023, basically that heightened performance that we saw, the candidates who raised unprecedented amounts of money because of all of you, the unprecedented number of grassroots activists and volunteers that we've had who are working on campaigns, who help drive our turnout to the upper end of what's possible. This big machine that we built in 2022, part of the question when I began Hopium at the beginning of this year was, would that strong performance in 2022 in the battlegrounds carry over to 2023? Would we be in the same electoral environment as we were in 2022? And the answer is yes. We worked, this community worked in Wisconsin. We won that Supreme Court seat with 56% of the vote, again, in the upper 50s in the battleground. We then won and worked in Jacksonville, Florida. We didn't work in Colorado Springs, but that was also a flip of a Republican-held city, major, large American city. We worked in Ohio, where we got up into the upper 50s, and just in August. And what we know is that in 27 special elections that have happened all across the country this year, Democrats have outperformed their 2020 numbers by 8 points. In 2022, in the 5 House specials that really convinced Tom Bonnier and I that something significant was happening in the election, we outperformed 2020 by 7 points in those 5 House specials. And that gave us a sense that something, the Democrats were performing at a higher level than people understood, or that the polling indicated, right? And so this year, we had 7 points over performance in 2022. This year, we've had 8 percentage points over performance over 2020 in 27 House and Senate specials all across the country for State House. And in a wider group of elections that 538 looked at prior to yesterday, we were outperforming the partisan lean of a district or a race by 10 points. So by 2 different measures, Democrats were having an extraordinary year. And what we didn't know, just in the way that Tom didn't and I didn't know, that those performances we were seeing in the run-up to the election in 2022 would carry over to election day itself. Things can change, right? We had this major event happen a few weeks ago, the barbaric attack on Israel by Hamas on October 7th. And there was a sense that maybe the election was changing, and there were polls that showing that Biden was dropping a little bit. But that same basic dynamic that we saw in special elections all across the country, that we saw in Wisconsin and Ohio and Jacksonville and Colorado Springs, has carried over to this election. And we had an extraordinary election. We gained ground in Kentucky. We got up into the upper 50s in Ohio again. We flipped the House in Virginia and really dealt a significant blow to one of the most important Republicans in the country, Glenn Youngkin, and bloodied him up in a way that was important for our national politics. We showed that abortion continues to be a dominant driving force in our politics, as does the opposition to MAGA. And we gained ground. We picked up seats in the New Jersey legislature. We flipped a plus 35 Trump district in New Jersey. We also know that, we got close in Mississippi too. We made that competitive. These are places that we have no business being competitive. And so rather there being, again, some kind of red wave and a drop off, we saw heightened Democratic performance and Republicans struggling. And now we're starting to get information in all across the country that we also had very strong showings in down ballot races and school board races and mayoralties all across the country. There were many municipal and local elections last night that didn't get as much press, where we also had remarkable performances. I saw on the internet that there was a county in Pennsylvania that was 10-1 Republican, the county executives, or the county, whatever they're called there, that flipped to 6-4 Democrat, right? We're talking about extraordinary things that happened last night, similar to the extraordinary things that we've been seeing all year. And as all of you know who follow Hopium, what I often talk about is that I believe that we have to strive to grow our coalition this election cycle, that Republicans, because of their extremism, are abandoning demographic and geographic real estate that we need to go take away. We need to get to 55, expand our coalition, get to 55, meaning get to 55% of the vote in the national election next year. And because I think that they're giving us opportunities to take voters and places away from them. And we did it last night. We grew, our coalition expanded. We keep getting bigger and stronger as a national party. It's a remarkable thing. I'm very encouraged by it. And as I think about what comes next, a year out from 2024, here's where I think we are. right? In terms of just the baseline. Joe Biden is a good president. The country is better off. He is effectively fighting for freedom, our freedoms and democracy here and everywhere around the world. He's made far-sighted investments in our future that are going to create prosperity and opportunity for the American people for a generation or more to come. The Democratic Party is strong. We keep winning elections all across the country. Our bench is the most powerful and strongest that it's ever been. Make your own list of folks from Bashir and Newsom and Whitmer and Kamala Harris. It's an incredible next generation that when the generational wheel turns in our party, as it has already begun with Nancy Pelosi's very effective passing of the torch to Hakeem Jeffries, when this generational wheel turns, the next group that's coming, to me, is the best group of leading politicians the Democrats have had since I've been in this business. So, and we have also all of you, the most empowered, strong, muscular, grassroots, most committed, most passionate, most loyal Democratic grassroots that we've ever had in the 30 plus years that I've been in this business. So we're strong, we're winning. We have a strong argument to make for re-election. We've got a great ticket at the top of the ticket that's going to carry the day for us. What do they have? As a strategist, I've just laid out sort of our path, right? We've got a strong case for re-election. We know from polling that voters don't know much about what Biden's done, and when they're informed, his standing goes up substantially. We've seen this in private polling, public polling. This is well understood that when the campaign turns on for real and the debate really begins sometime February, March of next year, that we know that we can make significant strides with Biden based on mountains and mountains of polling. That's one of the reasons why there's this quiet confidence in the Democratic Party right now, that we know that he's a little bit below where we want, but there's a clear path to move him up. What's Trump's path? What do the Republicans have? They have the most disgraced, dangerous, despicable nominee for president in all of our history. The Republican Party has continued to lose election after election in all parts of the country. They almost lost Mississippi last night, for Christ's sakes. They fell back in Kentucky. You know, we made gains in rock bed Republican areas all across the country. And what they're doing, what they're in the process of, and they now, what's different about 2020 is they've done two big things since 2020 that's going to push them further and further away from the American people. First is they've stripped the rights away of more than half the population. It was an incredible political error, and it's the kind of thing that can take, that can prevent a political party from being competitive for a decade or more, or even a generation. What they've done with Dobbs and the abortion restrictions has been a catastrophic event for the Republican Party and obviously for women all across the country. But politically, this was an enormous mistake, as we see again and again and again. But the other thing they did, which I think will be equally important in 2024, is that in 2021, there was a party-wide effort involving hundreds of Republican elected officials and leaders all across the country, including in many of the battleground states, who tried to overturn an American election and end American democracy for all time and install, in essence, a fascist dictator into the United States. It's an unprecedented attack on our democracy. And the party of Lincoln and Reagan will forever be the party that tried to end American democracy in 2021. They're never going to be able to shake that. That's always going to be part of the Republican brand. And rather than running away from all that, they're running towards it. They're creating more excuses for Trump's challenges. And imagine what's going to happen to Trump over the next 12 months between now and the election, because he's going to be the nominee. It will become known that he sexually abused at least one woman and many, potentially many more. He will be guilty of having conducted one of the largest financial frauds in American history and potentially be liable for hundreds of millions of dollars in penalties and interest on his stealing from the United States, from the state and local governments in the United States. Eventually, the IRS is going to have to get involved in this. We know that he oversaw what may be the largest security breach in the history of the country and shared some of America's most important secrets to people, to average people who sat in his club in Mar-a-Lago and God knows to what governments all around the world, making us far less safe and secure. And we also know that he led the insurrection and the effort to end American democracy for all time. I am confident that when we put our strong performance in the White House and how we've made the country better up against all that, when voters are informed, which is what campaigns do. He's been sort of out of the news. Yeah, I mean, if you follow the news, he's sitting in a trial in New York and he's smiling with his orange hair and all that stuff, and he occasionally does a political event. But when we begin to inform voters about what has been arguably the most dangerous and despicable elected official in all of American history, I am confident that we're going to win the election next year. I'm going to confident that we could win it by a large margin. And part of my goal here with the Get to 55 concept is that I think we need to win this next election by a huge margin in order to send a clear signal that the country's repudiating MAGA. And we need that for the country. We need that for our party, but we also need it for the Republican Party. Our goal should be that we want a normal center-right party in America again, if there ever was in recent times. It's a conceit, I have to say. And I think that our next job, and what we have done remarkable things together this year, many of you did remarkable things in 2022 and 2020, is we've got another big job ahead of us. We don't have to just win this next election. We got to run up the score and really make it clear that the country is turning its back on this dangerous politics. It has created an unprecedented threat to the America that we all love and cherish. We have a big job ahead of us. And I'm confident, though, based on our performance over the last few years, that we're up to the task. And I'm excited to be in the trenches with all of you as we go do the fight. And I want to also, as in the Hopium spirit, is that we also have to recognize and take the wins when they come. This was a remarkable election night. I was on, various feeds last night and talking to people, and I think we were all stunned at how well, things are always possible, but not likely. And I think that we performed again, as I often say, Democrats performed at the upper end of what was possible last night. Why? Because we have all of you. The money that you raise, the volunteering that you do, the voter contact that you do is giving our campaigns unprecedented resources to control the information environment. And then all of your grassroots work is pushing our performance on the ground to the upper end of what's possible in election after election after election. And that's why I'm so confident that once we put our head down and that we have a general election, which will be sometime February, March next year in all likelihood, that you're going to see Biden's approval rating and his standing go up 3 or 4 points as our wandering coalition begins to come home, and that we're going to be very well suited to take it to the Republicans, who are now down and defeated and extreme and divided, and have a great election next year. But we only can do it with all of you. So thanks, everybody. Those are my opening thoughts. I know we have a guest who's coming in soon, who's going to just say a few words. And I'm not going to take any hand raised yet because I want to let our guest arrive here in a minute. But thank you, everybody. It's been an extraordinary night. I'm so proud of all of you. And I'm excited about what we're going to be able to do over the next year together. Thank you for putting in where all of you are from. And Donna Deegan, I mean, there's some great comments. Let me just make one statement about the New York Times polling, because I know that's going to come up and until our guest arrives, and hopefully he'll be able to get in because we're a little bit overloaded potentially. The problem with the New York Times poll is that there is other polling and other data showing that their results are not true. And, we've had 2 polls just this week showing Biden up 4, Biden up 2. We know that their data on youth voters and Hispanics is very much out of keeping with lots of other polling. So I don't really want to talk about the New York Times poll anymore, and nor should anyone else, because it hasn't been confirmed in other data. And I just want to say that any polling that has Trump up in the high 40s or low 50s is, to me, immediately suspect. And it's suspect because the Republicans have only gotten over 48% of the vote once in presidential elections since 1988. And the idea that Donald Trump, of all people, hey, Sam, let me bring you in here. I'm going to answer the poll question in a second. Sam Cornale is here. He is the chief, the El Jefe of the Democratic National Committee. He's a great guy and a good friend, and I'm really just grateful that he's here. He wanted just to come by and say hello to everybody for a few minutes. You can imagine they're having kind of a crazy day, a wonderful day over there. And so, Sam, welcome, and I'm really grateful. I just went through my take on the election and thanked everybody for their hard work. As you know, that here at Hopium, it's hope with a plan, right? We just don't hope that things are going to be better. We work to make it so. And last night, a lot of people here worked really hard to help produce the election results that we have. And so welcome. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Simon. I love that, hope with a plan and action. I'm going to get to that in a second. I just want to start, Simon, by thanking you. We started getting to know each other when I became executive director, and you have a long and distinguished reputation and career within the party and more broadly within the sort of movement writ large. And I've just been blown away by how time and again you and all of your people and their people just step up and deliver. So hope with a plan and also action. So thank you for what you've done. Thank you for your partnership, for the many late night tech sessions when I was stressing, and you're being a real guiding light these days for the movement. Thank you, Simon. For all of you, I just want to introduce myself first, and I'm going to tie this to why I thought it was really important I come to say thank you first, and a few other things I'd like to touch on. But it gets back to my story and how I got in politics. I was born and raised in Madison, Wisconsin, and my mom largely raised my two brothers and I by herself. And she was a school teacher. Every night, no matter what extracurriculars we had going on, we would sit down around the kitchen table. She insisted on a sit-down meal, and she'd ask us our highs and our lows of the day. And every now and again, we'd turn the questions back on her. And it was those stories that my mom told me as a public school teacher that really animated my interest in politics. I still remember some of the children's names. Casey Rowan was a 7th grader who was shot and killed by a classmate. My mom got the phone call when we were sitting at the dining room table in Wisconsin. There's no law prohibiting you from having a loaded firearm outside of a gun cabinet, and still isn't. A young woman my mom mentored who showed up very early every Monday morning, and we couldn't figure out why. It was this saga that played out for about 6 months. We'll come to find out it was going to be her first hot meal in 2.5 days. And I just remember thinking that didn't seem right. Just didn't seem right. And it seemed like there should be something we ought to be able to do about that. And that's really what piqued my interest in politics as a vehicle, as really the only avenue for meaningful change, and one that we have so much agency in. I start there because I'm not a party politics person. And I think many people find that a little head scratching, and I do too. I ended up here kind of by happenstance. But my entry into politics was really through a candidate, a state senator in Madison named Mark Miller, who I ended up working for as an intern and then writing some speeches and things, and Barack Obama. And I wasn't a member of the College Democrats of America. I was a member of Students for Barack Obama. I believed in him. I believed in his cause. I believed in the politics that he hoped to build. And so I come at this not from a Democrat versus any other organization lens, but just about the work and about the outcomes. And so I just wanted to start by saying thank you. Thank you for what you all have done. I mean, there are 500 some people on this midday Zoom, which Simon has told me a lot about these, and that just blows me away. It gives me so much hope and energy to know that it's not entirely on the party's shoulders or the candidate's shoulders. It's on all of our shoulders, and you guys are just shouldering so much. I've just been blown away to see it in action. But more than that, more than just saying thank you, I want you to know that I and the chair and the party and our state parties and our candidates and other committees, we see you, and we appreciate you. And I think thanks can be fleeting. It feels a little transactional. But what I'm here to communicate is my genuine gratitude and appreciation, and really awe for what you all and Simon in particular have built. And none of the wins of the last 6 years, and there have been a lot, we are winning a lot. And you wouldn't know that sometimes when you read the press or, newspaper or turn on CNN, but we are winning a lot. And in some really tough races, despite what all the pundits and pollsters say, we are winning and we are delivering results. But none of that would be possible without all of you. And without the movement you represent and the values that you've brought to bear, whether it's making phone calls or through an organization or just showing up to a field office or giving money, whatever your fight is, it matters. And I see it. And I think that all too frequently, legacy institutions in particular, especially in the political arena, approach things too binary, too zero sum. You're either with us or what you're doing doesn't matter. And if you're not doing it through us, it's not helping. That's bullshit, excuse my French. And this fight is too big. The stakes are too high. Our enemies, our opponents are too well funded and just too evil to have us be trying to splice things about like who gets credit or not. This is our collective fight to solve the problems that I heard about as a kid around that kitchen table. So what I've seen all of you do and how well you do it and the gracefully organic tenacity that you all have brought to winning causes and campaigns and ballot initiatives in your communities, in your states, outside of your states and communities, talking to people you've never met or your next door neighbors, that gives me just an unbelievable amount of hope. And I am, consider me a loyal follower and subscriber, maybe addict to Hopium these days and what you all have built. Third thing I want to say, and I'm almost done, I'm not sick of winning at all. And I can all but guarantee you that you all aren't sick of it either. And one of the reasons we are so damn competitive right now, despite headwinds, despite environments, despite what people want us to think or they think themselves, one of the reasons is because of what you all and the party and others have built and the efficiency of our political marketplace. Simon has heard me riff on this before, but I am convinced that our strategic advantage, beyond the popularity of our ideas and our values and our alignment with the overwhelming majority of the American people, when it comes to raw tactics, the reason we are so competitive now and weren't in the past is because we built an incredibly efficient marketplace. Our candidates are strong. They're high caliber. They're outraising the Republican counterparts 2, 3, 4 times to 1. Our party committees are strong and working well together. We're focused on infrastructure. We've tripled the amount of money moving out to state and county parties in all 50 states just since my 2.5 years in the executive director CEO role. Outside expenditures are incredibly smart. They have continuity of leadership. People know what they're doing. They know their role. And all of the organizations and all of the movements and all of the causes that you all represent have a critically important role to play too. And it's because of all that coming together, a candidate doesn't have to worry about not having enough volunteers because you guys are stepping up. And our distributed organizing apparatus of 250,000 active volunteers who log into the internet, make phone calls and texts just like you all do, are stepping up. They don't have to worry about, air cover when they're trying to raise resources to do it themselves because outside expenditures are doing that for them. They don't have to worry about, the data and technology or tools or organizers on the ground because we're funding that. So we all have a role to play, and I would just encourage you and commend you for what you have done to date and what you're going to do in the future. And then last but certainly not least, I just want to say that, I'm not here to tell you we don't have work to do. I'm wide-eyed to the very real challenges, not the media concocted ones, but the very real challenges we have to do over the next 12 months. But that is a campaign. I'm sorry, that's what we do this work for. If things were perfect, if every candidate, if every cause, if every environment was perfect, then we wouldn't need to do this work. But we do. That's a campaign. And man, would I rather be us than them right now. And I think that we have 3 strategic objectives, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Simon. The first, and this is not just the DNC, it's not just the party apparatus, it's all of us, the movement. This is how I view it, and you probably have different strategic objectives or organize it differently. But I think first is that we had to play a meaningful role in 2023. We could not become a party or a committee or a DNC or state parties that were only focused on the shiny object of 2024, the big prize. It's a big prize. We got a whole bunch of Americans counting on us to deliver meaningful democratic leadership. And check that one off. Man, did we do a phenomenal job. Put outcomes aside, we were there on the ground from Indiana, where we just flipped 5 mayoral seats from Republican to Democrat. 4 of them are candidates of color, now electeds of color. 2 are African-American women. Just in Indiana, beat red Indiana, Terre Haute has a 27-year-old veteran who's now the mayor of Terre Haute, Indiana. to Virginia and Pennsylvania and Ohio and all the places we saw phenomenal results last night. The second objective, though, is we know the task at hand for 2024, and we know it will be tough, and we know we have a very strong contrast, but we're up against very evil, bad people. And so we cannot waste any single day. Time is our strategic advantage right now. But third, and I would argue just as important as the first two, is that this group, all of us who have the weight on our shoulders and are delivering, year in and year out, we have to be focused on building long-term political power. It is us who has to think the day after next November's election, we should be back here together again, hopium in hand, talking about what we need to do next. What's the next iteration of this mousetrap? And so I'm really looking forward to continuing this work together alongside one another as equals over the next year, and look forward to seeing you between now and next November, but if not, then for sure after, to hopefully celebrate some real meaningful victories. Thank you so much, Simon.
Sam, thank you so much. And I know you got to go, but I just want you to know our next event is with Anderson Clayton, this the state party chair of North Carolina.
You got some really good wins last night.
Yeah, North Carolina is going to be our adopted general election state here at Hopium. It's the place that needs the most help of all your target states, and so we are not letting up. And I think what's important for everyone to recognize here is, we got to take a couple of days to rest and to regain our and I need to sleep a little bit. But the general election's begun, and Sam is here, and this is the sign that now we're going to be partnering and working with the Biden-Harris campaign, the DNC, the state party apparatus. And one of the things that Sam and I have talked about is we have to find a way to make sure that this bottom-up grassroots revolution that's happened and all the groups that you represent are integrated and work in a partnership with the campaign and the DNC, and the state parties. It's really important. You guys have created new forms of organization. These are new things for those of us who've been around a while, that we need to figure out how to make sure that the link is where we're complementing one another and getting the most value out of this remarkable bottom-up grassroots revolution that's taken place. And Sam's very committed to that, and we've had great conversations about it. But we needed to get through this election first before we really. So him being here today, I just hope that for all of you who run grassroots organizations and are leaders of grassroots organizations, you just heard from one of the bosses that this is going to be a partnership, and we're going to go kick some ass next year, get to 55 as we call it here, and not just win, but win big. But Sam, thank you so much. I know you'll be back. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, let me get to questions. I hope that was Sam's an amazing guy, and I've gotten to know him. We didn't know each other that well, and up until, but we've been in the trenches the last few months, particularly in Virginia. And you should all know that the DNC put in millions of dollars into Virginia and also provided an enormous amount of strategic guidance, digital support, and all sorts. What he was saying was that, historically, the division of labor in our family is that the Democratic Party focuses on the presidential, the DSCC focuses on the Senate, the DCCC focuses on the House. And there are times when the DNC doesn't really get involved in off-year elections and things other than the presidential. He was alluding to that. This year, the DNC showed up as they did in 2022. They put in almost $100 million into the midterms in 2022 to help particularly build out the grassroots organizations in the midterms. This year, they were instrumental in what just happened in Virginia. They were the largest outside actor in Virginia. There are many, many people here today who worked very hard in Virginia, but this is a forward-leaning, ambitious, aggressive, leave it all on the playing field party right now. And I'm looking forward to bringing all of the Hopium community in with, the Biden-Harris campaign and the national enterprise, which, the general election does begin now. Trump's going to be the nominee. Biden's going to be our candidate. And I think if you even follow on social media, you saw today, I think for the first time, the Biden-Harris campaign really taking the gloves off on Trump. And it signaled a significant escalation of engagement against Trump, which I think is something that we need to do. And no one's really been going after him politically. He's been hurting himself through his ongoing performance. But today, the DNC, the Biden-Harris campaign, really launched a major effort to remind voters that there's been nobody more responsible for Dobbs and the stripping of rights of women in this country than Donald Trump. And that is going to be something that will be central to everything we do over the next 12 months. Let me go to some questions now. And I do want to acknowledge there's some people, this was, I had more people RSVP today than I expected, and some people were not able to get in, and I feel very bad about it. We may do a second one of these, but the recording of this will be available. And let me call on Irene. Irene, you're first up, and then I'll go to some written questions, and I'll go back and forth between written questions and people jumping in here. So Irene, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't have a question. That was a mistake. Sorry.
Well, anyway, nice to see you, Irene.
Thank you.
Let me lower your hand. Let me go to Patty. You've got you ready, Patty? You had your hand up. Let me get Patty here. Patty. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I made a mistake too. I think I was just going high five. I didn't realize. Again, thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah,
Welcome, Patty. Welcome to our happy
you.
home. And
Yeah.
okay, let me just clean up here a little bit. Let me go to some written questions, and I'll come back to some of the in-person questions. And I'm sorry we're not in meeting mode, but this was such a big group, and I left it pretty open. Yeah. Let me just say, I'm just seeing a bunch of questions here. I want to just make one comment about New York. You know, I was born in New York, and New York was not a total wipeout. Long Island, we lost Suffolk, the Suffolk County chair, but we did very well in other parts of the state. But there's work that needs to be done to continue to modernize the New York Democratic Party. And in an election that was essentially a blue wave, we did have some losses in New York. We didn't have losses in too many places anywhere else around the country. And I think the fact that New York struggled again is something that we have to take seriously here. And I know that we have many New Yorkers who are part of the Hopium community. And I think that, we know that Hakeem Jeffries has put into place, an effort that's going to partner with the party to make sure that in the congressional races, we have the funding and the structure that we need to be able to win. There's, clear learning from that. But, we have to do better in New York. And I'm careful that I don't want to get into the guts of New York politics. I don't want to make recommendations about anything, but virtually the only disappointing news we had last night in the whole country was what happened in Suffolk County and in Long Island, where we continue to struggle. And we've got work to do there. But I don't want that to obscure all the remarkable things that happened all around the country, or the continued strong performance that we have. We have to work very hard as Democrats right now, given that the media seems to be so convinced of the red wave and convinced of our weakness, that we can't spend, in my view, we need to be spending more of our time communicating with one another about all the things that have gone right and all the things that have, because that isn't often conveyed in the national media. So I was hesitant to even bring up New York. And let me make two. I just saw a lot of other questions, so let me address two other things that I know that are going to be top of mind, and then I'll call on some folks. What I was saying about the New York Times poll is that there is not definitive data showing that Joe Biden has faded in the last few weeks. There is some data showing it. There's other data showing that he's doing fine. And this notion that there's been some structural damage to his brand because of the Israel-Gaza conflict is just not there in the data. It's there in some data, but if you notice what I wrote last night in this new poll from Signal, which is a right of center pollster, by the way, it said that his numbers went up because of Israel-Gaza and not down, right? So I think that part of what we saw was that for the concerns that many had about whether or not Israel-Gaza was going to sort of fundamentally weaken our case in the elections, the exact opposite happened, right? We outperformed, I think, all expectations. But we have to acknowledge that a year before the election, some of our coalition has wandered. And we need, young people of color. This is not a surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that this has happened. We don't have a primary. There's no reason for our coalition to be engaged. And that's what Sam said. We have work to do. I mean, there's parts of our coalition that are wandering. We need to bring them home. That's what a campaign's for. And I'm pretty confident that the parts of our coalition that are wandering are not going to end up on the other side, given Donald Trump and his track record on many of the issues that are of great concern to those communities. So I'm confident that, we will be able to stitch this thing back together and hopefully even grow what we had in 2020 to 20 and expand up and to get to 55. I also think we have to recognize that the Israel-Gaza conflict, the rising tensions in the Middle East, Ukraine, right, is potentially giving Biden an opportunity that plays to his strengths, which is as a strong, steady leader, strongly, who is deeply familiar with the world, the international community and the world at large. And I think that over time, politically, this may give Biden an opportunity to remind voters about the best part of Joe Biden, right? That his age and his experience and his wisdom is actually the central cause of his success and our progress as a country. It's not just a liability, it's an asset for us. And so I think that, but we have to manage our way through it. I mean, certainly I think our politics is changing. And one of the things that I've written about at Hopium is that one of the things that's just very hard for me about what's happening in Israel right now is that I don't think it's very challenging for the Democratic Party to tie its fate to Bibi Netanyahu. And it's certainly my hope that, given his disgrace and his collapsed poll numbers and his obvious failures as a leader now over a long period of time, that somehow in the coming months that Bibi goes. I think that for us to be comfortable with what happens there, we need new leadership in Israel. And that's certainly something that I am going to continue to be an advocate for. And then let me say one last thing. And that's, you may have heard my barky dog, Tug, is over my shoulder. Before I take questions, I wanted to say one last thing. Why are we all here? What are we doing here at Hopium? What are we doing? Why are all of you spending all this time helping candidates and raise money? And I've had so many people say that in their retirement, they never thought they would be working in politics and making phone calls to faraway places, but here we are. We're here because in 1941, FDR gave the most important political speech that was ever given in American English, in my view. A speech that laid out that he wanted to, after World War II, to have a world that was based upon freedom, that its foundational value was freedom and not dominion and not authoritarianism and not colonialism and all the other isms that implied that there was one group of people on top of another. And those four freedoms that FDR laid out in 1941 became the foundation of the Atlantic Charter, became the foundation in the UN Charter, became the foundation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. It became the foundation of the modern world. And that we essentially, during that period, exported our American Revolution and the values of freedom that we had here to the rest of the world. And we built a global system based on this concept of freedom. And that global system in the last 80 years has created a golden age in human history. There's never been a better time to be alive in all of human history than in the last 80 years under Pax Americana, this global system that we built, that the United States built. We've seen extreme poverty go to the lowest levels ever recorded. We have more people living in democracies than any time in human history. We've seen life expectancy from 1945 go from 45 years old to 71 years old, extraordinary leaps in the ability to live fulfilled lives all around the world. And that golden age in human history was created by us, by Democrats. We did that. That's been our central project over the last 80 years, building a world based on freedom, the same freedoms that we had here in the United States. But we know that that world and those values are under attack and under threat today in ways that they may not have been in a very long time. That China and Russia and Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran are attempting to weaken and degrade, and Russia, I should say, weaken and degrade this global system that's created this golden age for human history in ways that are challenging for us. And this new reality that we're living in a time of conflict and not peace, that we have to defend freedom and democracy here and everywhere, which is really the foundational orientation of the modern Democratic Party going back to the 1940s. You know, we were called once before as a party, and we rose to that occasion, and we helped create this modern world that we have. We're being called again, in my view, now, 80 years later, to defend freedom and democracy here and everywhere. And it's why we're all here. And what's important to me about what motivates me, despite my dog barking and being unbelievably tired today to be with all of you, is that we are part of the most noble political project in all of human history, the Democratic Party of the United States. We've done more good for more people, this political thing called the Democratic Party, than any other political force in human history. And so we have a special obligation and responsibility as the heirs of this party to ensure that this world that we imagined and built 80 years ago and that we fought to maintain over all this time, we fought Cold War and all the other challenges we've had, that it's there for our kids and our grandkids and the kids and the grandkids of the people of the world too. And that's why we're here. That's why you're doing the work, because I think we all understand the gravity of the moment and that our democracy here in the United States is under threat in ways that it's never been in all of our history. And it's why there's so much motivation to do the work that all of you do. And what's most important is that we're winning. We're winning. We're winning. We keep winning. We keep beating them. And now we have one more election that we have to go win next year. So thank you all for being part of all this. Let me go to my old friend, Bill. Bill, I'm going to call on you. Bill, it's been great to reconnect with you. I don't know what country you're in, but fire away.
I'm in Greece.
Okay.
I think it's an interesting observation. One of the things that I noticed is how well down, really at the grassroots level, we did against the book banners.
Yeah.
And I think that connects to the abortion issue, because you have a party that claims they're for freedom, the Republicans, and in fact, they're for restricting your freedom having to do with your body. They're for restricting your freedom having to do with what you read and what you think. And I think, I would be interested in some of your comments about what happened with some of these book banners, the Mothers Against something or other, in the battleground states, because I think that's very key, and I think it's actually as key as abortion.
Yeah, listen, thank you, Bill. By the way, great to reconnect with you, brother. I mean, we've known each other a long time.
True.
I think we met in '92, I think, during the Clinton campaign, but thank you, Bill. Let me address this. Listen, I have a couple of thoughts about that. One is, I think that there is this basic sense in the electorate that something has gone wrong with the Republican Party. And the way we access that can be different in different races, depending on the candidate, depending on the set of issues. It can be the book banning, which was a bridge too far, right? It could be abortion. It can be their threat to democracy. It could be their plutocratic tax policies. There's a variety of ways that I think we have the ability to access this sense in voters that something's gone wrong with them and we can't trust them anymore, right? It's sort of the most benign way to describe it. And so, Bill, you're right. I think that for many people who lived in communities where they liked their teachers and liked their schools, the notion that there was these kind of savage attacks on the ability of teachers to teach and that people were banning books, it wasn't America. It was never. And you're right. I mean, like everything they do, right? Because their party has been overtaken by extremism and extremists, that they didn't calibrate this correctly. And they misread, in my view, the election results from 2021. And they just went too far because they actually are an extremist party right now. They have lost their grounding in the things that made America great. I mean, they are a threat to liberal democracy. And the kind of book banning stuff, I wrote the column that I referenced that I sent out this week that I wrote, a year and a half ago, there's not going to be a red wave column in the spring of 2022. At the very end, I wrote, if Republicans want to make this election about banning books, bring it on, baby. Right. And so I think that, yes, what's happening is that there are various ways that people, regular people, the people on this call, the people that we all work with, the people who are making the calls are rising up. We're not having big demonstrations like they had in Israel, right? We're doing it in other ways. We're doing it arguably in more effective ways, which is that we're working in elections and beating them. And so that's why I'm not worried about protests and all this other stuff, because the way we're manifesting our worry and our fear and our opposition has been very effective. And so, yes, there's been an enormous pushback. It appears, right? It's early, this data is very hard to aggregate, but just anecdotally, and I mentioned this in my piece today, that we have a lot of stories of people all around the country who had significant victories against the book banners and the extremists, the education extremists. And thank God, right? I mean, this is the sign of the health and vitality of our movement, that it's regular people taking their communities back from the extremists, and it's a bottom-up revolution. It's not a top-down one. I mean, the American people are saving our democracy. It's not necessarily our leaders. It's just a couple million people have decided that they're not going to let their democracy slip away, and they're fighting like hell, and they're winning. And it's really inspiring and encouraging and remarkable, and it's great to be part of all this with all of you. Let me go to Alan Paul, who has a question. Jump in here, Alan. Trying to unmute you, Alan. I'm not sure what's going on here. Someday I'm going to have somebody who manages all this for me, but I don't have it yet. Alan, I'm having a hard time.
Bye.
Are you there? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm sorry. I got a phone call from my son at the same time. Yeah,
What's
thank you.
your question or
Thank you
comment,
for all
Alan?
you do. I really enjoy your everything you do. I just wanted to comment on New York. I live in New Jersey, and I don't mean to be on Hopium, but it's extremely distressing that New York State government, the Democratic Party, well, we have Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries running the national party in Washington, is being run by this Cuomo hack. And I don't understand why they haven't gotten rid of him. And I think somebody like Ben Wickler in Wisconsin is a demonstration of what strong party leadership can do. And in Michigan,
Yep.
And here in New York and New Jersey, which should be leading the blue wave, we just don't have that. And the very idea that Tammy Murphy could end up with the party line in the primary in my state of New Jersey is also extremely distressing. So I guess I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, so let me, as somebody who is a New Yorker and myself by birth and grew up in Connecticut, the good news is that in New Jersey and Connecticut, right, we did really, really well last night. We won cities all over Connecticut that we flipped from Republican to Democrat. We gained seats in the New Jersey legislature, far beyond, by the way, what people thought was going to happen. And in New York, I think that there's two models of party chairs in our system. There's somebody like Ben Wickler, Anderson Clayton, strong party chairs who are really drive the party forward. And then there's another model, which is sort of a safe person who keeps the tribes from fighting with each other. And for anyone who's done politics in New York, preventing the tribes from fighting with each other and keeping everybody moving in the same direction is not an easy thing to do. I do think that the way this is being addressed now, and I mentioned this earlier, was that Hakeem has come in and built this superstructure to focus on the House races, which I feel is going to be effective, and I feel is the right thing. The state elections, the state and the county elections and stuff below the congressional is, there's going to have to be a reckoning here. I mean, let's just be clear. I mean, New York is really underperforming the rest of the country, and we can't pretend it's not happening. It is not something that I will necessarily get involved in. I'm just one guy, and there's just a limit to what I can do. And but I think there is, the concerns about the current party leadership have been well expressed very publicly and privately. And, we'll see what happens now that we had, that New York had an embarrassing loss last night. But I don't want to, as I said earlier, I don't really want to spend any more time on this because it's a very, very small part of everything that's happened over the last 18 months that has been remarkably positive. Let me go into the Q&A, just the written questions, to see if there's anything else in there. Don, listen, this is a public event. You can tweet whatever you want. And yeah, I'm just looking at the questions. I mean, I think I want to say that what I've written in the last few days, and I will republish it tomorrow because I was just too tired this morning to sort of cut and paste stuff. I'm going to take, I don't really want to take on the New York Times, and I don't really want to spend a lot of time on it because we've already, in many ways, we've sort of moved beyond it already. But let's just be very clear. Part of what Tom Bonnier and I did in 2022 was that we opened the aperture of the data we were looking at to go beyond just polling. That we felt that polling was not struggling a little bit to be as descriptive and as prescriptive as it used to be. And we started looking at things like fundraising and voter registration and the performance in special elections and the early vote and so on to create a more complete picture. It's like the polling is like a sketch, and we wanted to make a painting, if you wanted to think of it that way. And that having more data allowed us to, I think, have a more accurate understanding of what's happening. But there's an entire, community that makes its living off of polling and interpreting polls. And they're fighting, right? They're not really, in a way that's a little bit surprising to me, to be honest. It took Hopium here and the research that I had done about us winning elections all over the country. I was almost singularly responsible, along with the DNC. I did this with the DNC to get national journalists to pay attention to all these elections that were happening. I mean, imagine if there was a New Hampshire seat, there was a Biden seat that we lost by 11 points, like what happened a few weeks ago. That would have been a front page story because the RNC and the Republican noise machine would have made it one, right? And we kept winning and winning and winning, and nobody paid any attention to it. And it was very similar to what happened in 2022. And there were a lot of commentators that, predicted the red wave was going to come, and they're not letting go, right? I mean, they've made a professional, judgment that the Democrats are weaker than they look, the Republicans are stronger. And the more that we disprove that, the more they become marginalized as reporters, commentators, analysts, or anything else. And so we have this weird situation now where the whole kind of vast system of political analysis is wedded to what is an increasingly unreliable way of interpreting elections. We at Hopium and I have introduced these other ways, and it's still being openly challenged and mocked. I mean, Jonathan Chait in New York Magazine today has a piece saying that basically all these elections that we just won don't really matter, that it's Biden's still in trouble. And he's just incredibly full of shit, right? Like, it's just on such a basic level, the idea that us winning, continuing to win again and again and again doesn't matter. It just, for anyone to claim that is so ignorant about how our politics works. It's there's an arrogance to this, right? That's just been stunning to me. And so we have work to do. And the important thing is that, you should know, and based on Sam's presence here today, I'm working very closely with Biden World. And you even heard Sam use some of our phrases today here. I'd much rather be us than them, Hopium, and so on, right? So, I feel really good about, I want to close by saying this. I feel really good about where we are. I would much rather be us than them. They are in serious trouble as a national party. And I've documented data-wise over the last few days why I think that is. They nominated this ridiculous speaker. Trump is going to be the worst nominee in the history of American politics. We should be very upbeat. And I think that if I can give all of you one final word of advice, is we need to stop living in negative space as Democrats. We have to spend much more of our time living in hopium land and positive and making our positive case. We have to, it's amazing to me how quickly when I have these kind of conversations, when I write stuff, people go immediately into like the worst case, the negative place, the place of worry. That, I think that's become debilitating for us because it's obscuring all the good that's actually happening, right? I mean, you know, and I'll give you an example. If you read, and I'm going to rephrase this in the next few days, I've shown through data that people are actually pretty happy with their jobs and their work and their pay and their life. And, you know, in the way that we challenge the red wave data, I'm starting to challenge the structure of our understanding of how we understand the economy. I think Americans are actually really happy with their lives and their pay and their work. And yet that's not being elicited. It's one of the reasons we keep winning, because this notion that the economy is terrible and everyone's pissed off, it's not true. It's not true. The economy is arguably better than it's ever been in the history of the country. And people are pretty happy, actually, when you move beyond a narrow set of data points and expand the data, the aperture of data. And so this is going to be something I'm going to be spending a lot of time with. And again, so much of our media now, and so even too much of our internal discourse as Democrats is wedded to negative and to things and to worry, as opposed to celebrating all the good things that are happening. We have to rewire our brain a little bit, in my view, as Democrats, and spend far more time talking about us and our accomplishments and far less time talking about them and the things that have, you know, that are always go wrong. Like, you can't win every election. I mean, if the World Series champion loses playoff games along the way, you can't let a playoff loss ruin the, you know, or become more powerful than it really is. Let me go, everybody. It's been a pleasure and an honor being in this fight with all of you. This video will be up and available for folks this afternoon. There are people who are locked out today, and I had upped actually the number of people who could be on this, but apparently it didn't take effect for this particular talk, but we'll have bigger audiences. Love you guys, keep fighting, and you know, I'm really grateful and inspired by the community we're building here together. Take care, everybody.